Welcome back to the This Day podcast. This week on the podcast, we have coach and podcaster and just all around friend Heather Sudbrock joining us for an episode. Before we dive in, let's check out a word from our sponsor.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the This Day podcast. My name is Megan and I'm so excited that you would take time out of your day to join us for the podcast. I want to take a minute to thank one of our incredible sponsors, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an incredible tool that you can use to get the help that you need for your mental health because we all know that our minds are important to us. The Bible talks about renewing our minds. So we need to renew our minds daily. And if you are somebody that struggles with your mental health, or you know somebody that struggles with your mental health, you can get professionally licensed help with their round-the-clock therapy. They even offer Christian therapists to help you. If you are going through a hard time, you can use our code in the show notes below to get the help that you need today. Check them out.
Heather, I'm so excited for this podcast, so excited to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this ever since we've been connecting here the past couple weeks. So why don't you just share a little bit about yourself and give a little fun fact about who you are and what you're about?
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited for this discussion, especially because we've had some really good conversations previously. So I've been looking forward to us doing this together and to get you on my podcast eventually as well. But yeah, so let's see. What was the questions again?
So give your a little bit of a background to who you are and just share
Okay.
something fun that when you're not doing
Oh,
what you do for a living, what do you like to do?
that's why I forgot. Fun. What's fun? I literally just had somebody ask me that the other day, and they were like, Heather, what would you want to do for fun? And I was like, I do what I do for fun. Like, I love helping women find their voice, get clear on their message, launch podcasts. Like, that's fun to me. But they're like, but what would you do if you like had a day off from that? And I was like, for one, I don't have days off from it. But for two, I guess if I was going to try to answer your question more realistically, I would say I would do the same thing I do now, but I would do it either up in the mountains or at the ocean because that's really fun to me. I love being around other Christian women who are on fire for the Lord and they have vision and they have purpose and so I do what I love because this is what I've been called to do. And it's incredible seeing women share their visions and then help them birth those visions and bring them to life and strengthen and embolden their voices to speak their testimonies against the enemy. And that is what I do. I have a business called Resist and Roar, and you can find it at resistandroar.com. And I literally help women learn how to, as James, I think 4:16 says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. So we need to submit to God, resist the devil and he will flee. And then roar is Revelation 12:11 says, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimonies, we will overcome him, meaning the enemy, the devil, loving not our lives unto death. So our testimony is a secret weapon, but our testimony cannot be shared unless we roar it with the voice that we've been given. And whatever that voice is, and that voice can come out in many different ways. You can write your voice, you can speak your voice, but I think the most powerful is if you can speak your voice. And especially if you have a voice, it's really important to be able to say things that I've been learning through my life and seeing it through the lives of women who I work with that we're getting silenced by the enemy. And it has been an agenda since the beginning of time, since Genesis 3:15, when God basically declared there was a war that would be from the woman and the serpent from that moment forward. And there has been. And it's been to keep our voices silent because if we raise up our testimonies, it slays the enemy. That's when we
Yeah,
get to put our heel on his head. So, yeah.
absolutely. That's so powerful. And I love that that is the model behind your business. Because I'm going to sidestep away from the next little segue question that I was going to ask you, because I think this is like so important to touch on. But there's so many times, so apart from, this podcast and apart from, what I do on the ministry side of things, I, coach and do artist management for a lot of artists here in Nashville. And a lot of female artists specifically will come to me because I'm a female. So it's easier to confront some situations, woman to woman, than, just a ton of other ways. But so many times the number one thing is, hey, like I just feel like I went into this room and instantly I walked in and just didn't know what to say. I was put down, like I just felt silent. And
Mm.
it is so, that's the number one question I get. Like there's other questions I get, like wardrobe questions, like just trivial things. Um, but the number one question is feeling silent. And how do you overcome that? And in the Christian space specifically, and it is so scripture based. Like the fact that you have a business built on that, just it encourages me to then move forward even more to encourage these artists, because there's people like you out there that are, encouraging people every day.
Yeah. And that is the beautiful thing, because as soon as one of us starts standing up and using our voice the way God intended us to use it, it encourages someone else to stand up and use their voice. And the perfect example of that, how do I nutshell this story? I'm going to nutshell it, and I'm going to say, if you go to my podcast, you can listen to the episode in full to hear
Go
the
for
whole
it.
story. But basically, when I was 28 years old, I was kidnapped in Belize and by human traffickers. And it was this whole crazy situation. The first person I told made fun of me and said I was being dramatic when I was terrified and traumatized and telling them about it. And so I shut down and I never spoke about it again for like 10 years. And finally, there was this woman who I'd met with at a business meeting, and she was telling me about an event she had. And basically, she invited me to come speak, which at the time, that was my greatest fear in the whole world, was public speaking. Basically,
Yeah.
any kind of speaking to any kind of people was a deep fear for me. But I didn't know how to say no. So I ended up speaking at her event, and I shared the story of how I was kidnapped. And when I was done, I was so relieved it was over. And she came up to me and she was like, Heather, I know you're so relieved it's over. And she's like, and you are totally fine to just be done. She's like, but I do have to tell you, there's some women and girls standing over there, because it was a mother-daughter type event.
Yeah.
And she's like, and they just really would like to talk to you. And I was like, about what? And she's like, I don't know. I think they have questions and things like that. And I was like, okay, fine. So I went over there, and the first girl that came up to me, she was about 14 years old, and she was shaking like a leaf. She was so nervous. And she handed me her phone, and she's like, can you please read this? And I stood there and read it, and it was an article on her phone about the proverbial perv in his mom's basement who was catfishing a young girl, acting like he was a teenage boy, and had lured
Hmm.
her to a mall parking lot. And while he was shoving her in his car, the SWAT team showed up and caught him. And it was a long, detailed story. So I stood there reading it, thinking, oh my goodness, I said I'd read it. So now I have to read it, but I don't know why she wants me to read this.
Yeah.
And when I was done, I handed it back to her, and I was like, wow, that's a crazy story. And she's like, yeah, that girl is me. And she's like, but I'm not legally allowed to say anything because it's going on in court right now and I'm under a gag order. And she's like, but I wanted you to know that my plan was that when this was over, I was just going to end my life. And she's like, but because I heard you saying what you were saying, and you were talking about how you felt like you were so stupid that this happened to you. How could this have happened to you at 28 years old? She's like, and I'm 14 and I'm feeling like I'm stupid that happened to me. And I couldn't live anymore with everybody knowing that I was so dumb. I let something like this happen to me. She said, but you were saying that. And then you're saying how you've had to learn how to move on from that. And you're standing here and you're telling a whole room of women and girls this. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing these women and girls and the way they're listening to you. And all of a sudden, I realized when this is over, I'm going to stand on a stage and I'm going to tell people my story. And in that moment, something in me shifted so crazy because it killed the fear in my voice, because I realized that my voice activated her voice. I realized that my ability to like walk past my fear and share this particular message with this particular audience unlocked her voice, so that she now believes she has a purpose. She has something to live for, when before she was wanting to take her life because she felt the shame and the guilt so deeply from what she had been through. And then it was interesting because then the women and girls that came up afterwards, they also had crazy stories that they were sharing as well, which was surprising because the room was only like maybe 200, 250 people or something like that in the room. It wasn't that many, but there was probably like, I don't know, 7 or 8 women and girls who had stories in that small room. And one of them was a woman who was 60 years old and she'd been kidnapped in the Bahamas by a cab driver, which I had been kidnapped in Belize by a cab driver. So it was just, and now I've shared it in other rooms, and I still have women who will come up to me and share very similar stories. And the crazy thing is most of them have been silent and haven't spoken about those stories since they happened because they felt shame. Why?
Yeah. Wow. That
It's
is
not, yeah.
That's crazy to me. But I think shame is like, that's such a key word that you brought up there, right? Because
Mhm.
shame is one of those things that it holds us back from sharing our truth, from literally being able to stand up and say, hey, this is how far God's grace has brought me. This is where the grace of God has brought me from point A to point B, or, I'm still being shaped and moved, but shame holds us back.
Yeah.
Just because we don't think we're enough, like we don't think um, we can make it to the next day or to the next minute or to the next hour. I always tell people, I'm like 24 hours at a time is all you need. And I had a friend tell me the other day, he said to me, he's like, Megan, I just take it 1 hour at a time some days. And I looked at him and I was like, I think that's really good. I think that, 1 hour at a time, sometimes that can be it.
Yeah. It's interesting because where is it? In James in the Bible, there's a scripture that says, how does it word it? Do not say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. But instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall do this or that. But now we boast in our arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So we're actually not supposed to live beyond the moment we're in. We're supposed to live step by step with the Lord in obedience. But it takes all that anxiety and fear away when we're not living ahead of the moment we're in, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so good. Now, you have this incredible testimony. You've built this incredible business that you can encourage women on a daily. You can do what you love every single day. So talk to us a little bit more about the business you've built and what your day-to-day looks like.
Okay. So I have done business coaching kind of stuff in general for many, many years, for probably like around 12 years. But it wasn't until last year that I really started focusing on podcasting. I've always told people how to podcast because I've been podcasting for about 12 years as well. But, and I've grown up in a we had a family business growing up. So entrepreneurship has always been in my bones kind of thing. I've always done that kind of stuff. So I'm nutshelling a lot of that. But to say that in 2023, I was living in South Carolina at the time, and the place I was staying was like not a good place for building relationships, networking, and business. It was more industrial kind of area. So I just didn't know what to do. And I was praying to the Lord, and I was like, Lord, I don't think this is going to work to build the relationships I need to launch the business plans to the next level that I have. And then this uncle who hadn't been in my life for around 30 some years came back into my life through a telephone call. We started talking. I was telling him about my business woes. And he said he lived in Dallas, Fort Worth. And he's like, why don't you come stay with me? I have a room, an extra room and bathroom in my house. You can just have that private space and launch from here. He's like, there's just no way you can't succeed in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I was like, well, thank you. But yeah, no, I've never even thought of moving to Texas. It's just never been on my radar. And I love the Carolinas. I loved the triangle of Georgia and the Carolinas and Tennessee. And it just was so many sweet spots all together. But right at that moment in my life, things just weren't working out that way. And so I went to the Lord and I was like, what should I do? And I was like, if you haven't told me about Texas, I'm not going. And the Lord said, I have told you about Texas. And I was like, no, you haven't. And he said, go back and look in your journals, Heather. And I've journaled my walk with the Lord since 2018. So I went and I looked and I found a word that a brother in the Lord had given me from 2020. And I didn't believe the word. And I almost didn't write the word down because I didn't believe it so much, except that I just felt this heavy pressing that I was supposed to write it down. So I did. And basically, this brother had a vision of the state of Texas outlined in a glowing light. And he said, then Heather, he said, the Lord told me he was going to send you to Texas and you were going to launch a business and a ministry and you were going to find the honey in the land. And he said, then I saw you getting into a white SUV and you were driving all over the nation and then all over the world. And you had all these women with you. And I was like, I already have a business and a ministry. I don't know what you're talking about. So I just so argued it. So I saw this and I'm like, okay, Lord, I guess you did say something, but here's the deal. I don't want to go to Texas. And I'm afraid because I don't know anybody there. And my uncle's 80 years old. So if something happens, then I'm going to be stuck in Texas and I don't even know anybody. And I was like, if this is really you, then can you please just give me perfect peace? Because I have no peace about this. The very next morning, I woke up with peace. 3 days later, I was driving to Texas. As soon as I got here, and for the next 3 months or so, every single woman I talked to, they kept bringing up honey in every single conversation. And I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. It would just come up in the craziest ways. And I'd be sitting there waiting, thinking, oh, we're going to end this conversation and they aren't going to say it. One girl, I was like, well, before I go, what's your Instagram handle? And she's like, honey dipped 07 or something. And I'm like, what? Dang it. She said it. And so it kept happening. So I went to the Lord. I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm hearing honey everywhere. I'm in Texas, but I don't know what the honey is. And I don't know what you want me to do with it. And the Lord said, go study honey in the scripture. So I did. It was all throughout the scripture. It's kind of surprising how much honey is in the scripture. But one of the scriptures that stood out to me was in Psalm 81:16, where the Lord is crying out to Israel. And he says, if only you would have repented, if only you would have turned back to me, I would have fed you with the finest of wheat and with honey from the rock, I would have satisfied you. And I was like, what's honey from the rock, Lord? And he said, Heather, honey is my supernatural provision in the hard places. My daughters are coming out of their wilderness seasons, leaning on their beloved with honey dripping from their lips. And I was like, okay, all right, well, I think I found the honey in the land, Lord, but what am I supposed to do about it? And he said, you're already doing it, Heather. What are you telling them when they're sharing their testimonies with you? And I was like, I'm telling them to podcast because podcasting is amazing. And he said, yes, teach them how to podcast. I was like, what? Okay. So I started teaching podcasting. I put together an in-person accelerator. Within the first 3 months, I was here in Texas. And for the next few months, I ran these 30-day accelerators where I would help these women come together and in 30 days launch a podcast. And in the meantime, I was building an online virtual version of that. And now that's what I have. But it's just been amazing because I have so many other business skills. And so the goal is helping women learn how to get clear on their message, because when you get clear on your message, that's what unlocks your voice. When you already know what you're going to say and you're good at saying it, you won't have fear because you know what you're supposed to say. Think of the example of so many Christians who are saying, I'm afraid to witness. I'm afraid to witness to people and minister to people. Why are you afraid? Well, because I don't know. They might ask me things I don't know. Well, that means you're not prepared. That means you don't know the message. So if you aren't prepared and you don't know the message, yes, you're going to be afraid because you could be put in a compromising position you don't know how to stand up to. And that's the same across the board in any situation. Any young woman who walks into a studio room to meet with some bigwig guy, she doesn't know what she's walking into. And especially with all the things that have come out in the media, whether they call themselves Christian or not, that's a potentially dangerous and uncomfortable situation for her. But if she knows who she is in Christ, if she knows where she stands and what she believes, and she knows how to defend the message she's standing on, and she's unwavering in it, and she's going to have no fear to back out and walk away, because her identity isn't in being a musician. Her identity isn't in her voice or in her, not even in her message. Her identity is in the Lord alone. Then she's unshakable because nobody can bribe us. Nobody can move us when he is our all in all. And then when we have a message, nobody can rock us, because that where our feet are on the solid rock, which is the Lord, and our message is clear, and we know who we're supposed to be speaking. We know what rooms we're supposed to be in. That room, that first time I spoke, I didn't know I was supposed to be in that room. I didn't know that my story was the perfect story for that room. My friend who brought me into that room, she knew, because she understood what she was setting up, but I didn't. Yeah. But I actually got to experience it that day when I saw that no matter how terrible I was at sharing my message, I was reading it all off the slide projector behind me. That didn't matter. What mattered was that story for that particular audience at that particular time was needed. And that's what had impact. And that's when I began to learn the power of being clear on your message. When you are very crystal clear on who you're supposed to be speaking to, what problem you're helping them serve or solve, what transformation you're helping them get with the message you're sharing with them. Even if you're a comedian, you have a message. Your message is to help people laugh. That's the problem you're solving. And the transformation is laughter, happiness, joy. And maybe they're in the midst of sorrow and trouble in their life, but if you can make them laugh, then that's a transformation. So you're helping them achieve a transformation they sought you for. So that's the little bit of a nutshell of getting clear on your message. But once you are, that's what unlocks your voice. And that's where you start to become more bold, because I was so afraid to speak. But when I saw that little girl, my message impacted her in a way that made her no longer want to take her life, and suddenly made her feel like she had a purpose and a value, and she no longer felt shame just because of what I shared, I realized, whoa, this message just slayed the enemy, because the enemy wanted to take this girl out. But the enemy was stopped by me in all my fear and discomfort sharing that message. So that is the beauty of getting clear on our message. And then our voice, we have to get it out there. And so we have to find the right platforms that we put our voice out there on. If you're a singer, then maybe you're singing. And I say maybe because the Lord had David anointed to be king. The oil was poured on his head. But it was about 17 years later before David became king of Judah, let alone king of Israel. And why? Because God had already anointed him. because then we have to be qualified. So you may have been called and sanctified by the Lord to sing, maybe. If that's true, you now have to go through a sanctification process. And if you try to skip that by just jumping to the crown, if David would have just jumped to the crown, Saul would have probably killed him.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that because there's like a process. The Lord has a process. He gives us the vision, then he qualifies us for the vision, then he positions us for the vision. But in the qualification, that's when we're getting clear on the message. David was getting clear on the message. What does it mean to be king? He didn't know. He was a shepherd boy. He had to go serve a king before he could be king, because he had to learn what palace life was even like. He had no clue. So that was him getting clear on the message of kingship. What is it? What does it mean? And how do you follow God in a place like that? It might be a lot easier to follow God when you're alone in the wilderness or out in the field. But once you're in the hustle and the bustle and there's beautiful things everywhere and it's distracting and you're busy all the time, can you follow God then? That's the test. And then he starts preparing you and positioning you. And then you take the throne. Then your voice gets activated by the Lord. And then you have to figure out, so is this my platform? Is it to sing? Is it to speak? Maybe I do a mixture. Maybe I have a message I share on a stage before every song, and this is what the Lord's given me to share. And I love it because I'm rebranding my podcast right now. Currently, it's Kingdom Academy, but I don't know. I'm literally going to work on finishing out the rebrand this weekend. So hopefully it will be Burning Bones soon, because I'm changing it to Burning Bones because of Jeremiah 20, verse 9, which says, where Jeremiah was literally stopping his talking to the people about the Lord because he was being persecuted so badly for what he was saying. And he was like, I'm done. I'm not saying anything else. But then he went to the Lord and he said, Lord, your word is like a fire caught up in my bones, and I cannot remain silent any longer, because he had that message burning in him. We have this shame and fear and religious lies and whatever it is that has silenced our voices as women. And so we're afraid to speak. People are going to judge us. People are going to accuse us. People are going to attack us. People are going to tell us it's not true what we're saying if we've been through abuse or whatever it is. Whatever the messages we're trying to put out, we know the attacks are going to come, so we're afraid to say it. But we have to understand that warfare is part of our walk. It's part of the process of what we're doing. So the message that's caught up in our bones is caught up there because of fear, because of shame, because we're being silenced by the enemy. And when we realize that the reason we're like, no, I'm not going to talk about it, is because the enemy actually has control over us, that's when we can start realizing, okay, Lord, give me the courage. Show me how to have the courage, which we have to stay in his word, because the more we read his word, the more his word will build up that courage inside of us. And when that happens, that fire will begin to release from our bones. And that's the message. That's the message God has caught up in your bones. And it's usually caught up in a place where the devil has attacked you so bad, you have trauma there. You have fear there. Because the very place you fear the most is the place where your anointing is. My greatest fear was public speaking. And then the Lord started calling me to podcast and eventually to teach other women to podcast. And I was like, what? My greatest fear was using my voice for anything. But that was the very thing the Lord had his finger on in my life, was for me to speak. It just took many years and a lot of healing that I had to go through, because I didn't have somebody who could help me understand what it meant to get clear on a message until the Lord moved me into that moment. And in that moment, when I spoke at that event, that message unlocked my voice. And it truly took the fear away from me, because I realized it doesn't matter if I say if and but. If I forget what I'm saying, Like none of that matters.
Yeah,
What matters is that I speak what the Lord's told me to speak, that I'm speaking to the right audience about it, and that it's getting through to them because then it's going to slay the enemy.
absolutely. That's so good. And I think your message comes through every time that you speak or that you share. Anything that I've ever heard, like on your podcast, all of the things, it comes through so relevant. Now, what is something, so say there's somebody listening to this today, that they're like, we want to start a podcast. We want to get our message out there, but we have one Instagram follower. We live in the smallest town in America, and all of our neighbors are our family, like what advice would you give them?
So the beautiful thing is nowadays, it doesn't have to be about, and that's the beautiful thing about podcasting. It doesn't matter if you're in the smallest town and you have one Instagram follower, because when you launch a podcast, if you launch it with a very specific message, we call that niching. If you
Yeah.
niche down, that means if you get a really targeted audience who you're speaking a very specific message to, solving a specific pain point, giving a specific transformation with that message, then the algorithms, the way podcasts work, excuse me, sorry about my voice
You're
today.
good.
The way podcasts work is that it's going to put you out to the right audiences. And so it goes out across the world. You'll have listeners in nations and countries you may have never been to. And it's just so absolutely incredible. And so when you're starting, let's say you have 50 podcast listeners and you're like, that's small. I'm not doing good. Well, think about being in the room with 50 people and they're all there to listen to your message. What are you going to say to them? And why are they coming there? They're coming there because of a specific message you spoke that drew them there. If you keep changing that message, I'm going to speak about this and I'm going to speak about this and I'm going to speak about this, they'll keep falling away because they came for a specific message and
Yeah.
now you keep changing the message. Then you'll lose people, new people come on, then they'll lose people. That's how you get those small numbers in podcasting. But the way to get the big numbers is to be really niche specific in what you're talking about, and you start putting that podcast out. And then, yes, on your social medias and stuff like that, you have to have a specific purpose for each one of your social medias that you use, whatever you decide to use, and a reason you're deciding to use it. And all of it correlates, all of it connects. So then you specifically start putting out, for example, with mine, Burning Bones is going to be my podcast. It's all about getting clear on your message to unlock your voice. That's my podcast. So even my guests who come in, they're going to be sharing about that and their journeys as well. My YouTube is going to be more about the voice. So that's going to be where I'm going to have women coming to share their testimonies about the trauma they've been through and what was that pivot moment that the Lord used in their life that shifted them out of that trauma and into their purpose.
Yeah.
Because we all have those types of moments once we get there. And yet all these things they all work together. They're all part of my program because my program is about teaching you how to get clear on your MVP, and that's your message, your voice, and your platform. And so my podcast is my message, my YouTube is my voice, and my Instagram is my platform, because I'm using the Instagram where I'm going to teach all about the tech and the platforms and content creation kind of stuff on that. So and I'm saying all that for an example of if you have one follower on Instagram kind of deal, like
Yeah.
just be really niched in the topic you're speaking about. And then that niche topic is going to have a slow snowball effect of starting to grow. And then you keep referring people to your podcast for what your podcast is about. And then from the podcast, you're like, and by the way, if you want more information on tech, go check out my Instagram. If you want to hear stories about unlocking your voice, go listen to my YouTube. So you have a purpose for each one and it's very niched, then they'll start growing because the algorithm knows how to move something to a niche. It's when we put all the things in one pot that the algorithm gets confused, doesn't know what to do with it, and pretty much just doesn't move you anywhere then.
That I think is so, so good. Because I think it also leans into, like you don't have to be the person with 10,000 followers to start a podcast. You can be like the everyday human that just has a voice and has something to say that you believe is important, and you want to get it out there.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is just so important. Heather, I think your mission and your voice and everything, that you just said right there is so important because it's for the everyday person. You don't have to have over 10,000 followers to start a podcast. And I think so often that's the misconception. You need to have this many followers on this platform, or you need to have done like this many YouTube vlogs to make it count, or have been speaking at this many churches or venues or conferences. Um, but that's honestly such a misconception. Everybody has a voice and everybody has something to share. And you are such living proof of that with what you do and how you help people to find their voice and to build their brand. And
Yeah.
I just think that's so, so, so important.
Well, yeah. And then that's it kind of is the same thing when it comes to monetizing as well. So, again, the old ways of monetizing on a podcast are getting sponsorships. You have to have 10,000 downloads just to start getting sponsorships and all of that. But
Girl.
now that the market is so saturated in podcasting, that's more difficult to achieve. You can, especially if you really niche. That's what does it. But most people don't. So they never get there. But again, you come back to that super clear message, that niched message, then now we can create a monetization plan for you. Once we have a super clear message for you, I can help you write a book so fast. I've helped multiple clients write books in just months. You can have a book, and which are great authority builders and platform builders. And then we can create like a monthly membership subscription that you can create for your audience where they literally pay you a fee monthly. So every month that's building. And so that fee is building so that you're making that monthly income regularly, like a subscription based kind of thing. And then that with the book sales, with your growing audience and your platform building, think about it. When you've listened to certain YouTubers or podcasters before, if you've ever listened to them, you start listening to them and they say, oh yeah, and I have this book. You want to go buy it. Why? Because you know who they are, you like what they're talking about, you're following them because you like what they're talking about, and now they have a book. Oh wait, what? They launched a t-shirt line. I want to go check out that t-shirt line. What do you mean they launched a membership? You mean I can actually get access to talk to them? How awesome is that? And I don't mean that in like a celebrity style kind of thing. I mean that as in you're serving somebody with so much excellence that they want more access to you and what you have because they know you can help get them that breakthrough, that promised transformation that you're always talking about in your podcast, whatever that is. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
there's
that's
just,
so good. Like,
yeah.
honestly, all of those, because I know like a little bit of insider information on this podcast. Like, so I launched this podcast in 2020, and I think I've talked to you about this. And right away, I built it from the ground up, right? So people knew me as Megan, music industry Megan, right? But they didn't know like, oh, well, Megan also has, this kind of facet or this side to her. So when the podcast came out, I was like, I have to figure out how to monetize this because there's going to be different people on here and all of these different concepts coming down the road. And right away, the misconception was sponsored ads and like sponsored businesses. But when you first start a podcast and they want to see Instagram profiles and all of the things, and I'm like, 10,000 followers are not are not happening, in the first I mean, maybe if I was like a Kardashian, just for an example, and had like a lifelong career.
Yeah.
But I'm not that like usually I'm the person behind those people, right? So I'm known by association of who I work with, right? Like not the person out front. So I think, alternate
But
forms.
see, you literally just mentioned an area that's your niche. You can speak to other people who are behind those types of people.
Yeah.
And there's a whole army of those people out there who don't have voices and they probably have a lot to say. And I don't mean just tattling on who they work with. I mean, they probably have their own purposes, their own passion, their own voices, their own messages that they would like to get out there, but they have no clue how because they've always been the person who works behind somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing, I've found as I've gone this road is it is one of those things where like most of us, you meet somebody, at an industry thing and you're known for who you work for. It's like, oh, so you work for this person. So cool, nice
Yeah.
to meet you. You're known by that. So when I launched this podcast specifically, I was like, it's people don't realize it's Megan from, all of her client because they just have never associated that. So that was just
Yeah.
a little fun.
Megan with a voice.
Yeah, a little fun nugget of information. Um, but
That's
okay,
good.
how can people, because you have a lot happening, right? Like people can sign up to have you work with them. You obviously have your own podcast. There's so many different things that you do, and this is what you do. So people need to hop on the Heather train. How can they do that? Where can they find you?
So
All of the
they
things.
can go to resistandroar.com and they can find me there. They can find my offers there. You can go to Resist and Roar on Instagram and find me there. Right now on YouTube, I'm at Heather Sudbrock. That's just my full name right now. But all that's changing because of the rebrand. But for now, you can go there and find me. If you go to anything Resist and Roar, that's staying the same for that. So you can find me. If you go to my Instagram and you click the link in the bio, that gives you access to everything right now. But same with resistandroar.com. You can get access to a lot of stuff there too. But yeah, so my three main offers are that I teach you how to launch a podcast. I have an offer that teaches you how to monetize the podcast, and I have an offer that teaches you how to position and sell your offers via podcasting. So those are just like they kind of scale. So depending on where you're coming in at, if you have a podcast already, but you want to monetize it, then you can come in at that mid-tier offer. Or if you have a podcast and you have some monetization plans, but you don't really know how to position it and sell it, then you can come in at that other offer. So, or you can just go through the whole process with me, which realistically, we end up usually having to do it that way anyway, because we usually have to go all the way back to the message and get clear on that message. Because a lot of people will launch businesses, ministries, whatever, and their message is just kind of wobbly and all over the place. And we usually have to go back to that and kind of reboot everything. But yeah, I have a virtual 5-day challenge that is coming out. So if you click the link in my bio on Instagram, you can get access to that. And that's going to teach you all the how I help you build a podcast and monetize it. And it goes into the training details of how that works. And then if you're in the Dallas Fort Worth, Texas area, then I have live in-person workshops that I'm hosting here right now. So you can get access to that all at the link in my bio on Instagram at Resist and Roar.
That's so fun. Oh my goodness. Well, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast today, Heather, and joining us and
Yeah.
um, for all that you do to just encourage and um, push women forward in their callings.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and I'm really excited for everything you have coming as well. So,
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you want to continue the conversation, check out the Fully Known devotional available on Amazon, written by me, myself, and Megan. I hope that you check it out and remember that you are fully known by the God of the universe, the God of a million stars who created you. Check out the devotional today on Amazon.
Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the This Day podcast. Go ahead and follow us on all of the social media platforms we are on at This Day Ministries, and be sure you give Heather a follow too, so you can keep up with her podcast and her ministry. Know that you're loved.